All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to unpack a pretty wild theory, one that claims our entire financial system isn't at all what we've been told. We're talking about everything: your birth certificate, your taxes, even the money in your wallet being part of a plan that's over a century old. And get this, a massive reset could be just around the corner.
So let's kick things off with a massive question, one that the material we're looking at puts right at the center of everything. What if the financial system we all live in, the one with all the debt, taxes, and inflation, what if it isn't just a little broken, but secretly and fundamentally illegal? I mean, that's a huge claim, right? But it definitely taps into those feelings a lot of us have about our money and our future.
Okay, so to get our heads around this, we're going to break it down into four main parts. First up, the so-called lies that the whole system is supposedly built on. Then we'll get into this wild idea about your personal identity. After that, we'll look at the high-tech solution they propose, something called the quantum financial system. And finally, we'll explore what this future of, well, abundance could actually look like.
All right, let's jump into part one and start right at the beginning. Because according to our source material, the very pillars of our modern financial world, we're talking the Federal Reserve and the IRS, were built on a foundation of pure deception. The year 1913, that's the year that keeps popping up as the ground zero for all of this. The claim is that this is when a handful of powerful private bankers secretly created the Federal Reserve. And if that wasn't enough, in that same year, the IRS was born with what was promised to be just a temporary tax. To top it all off, the source says the constitutional amendment that was supposed to make it all legal, well, it was never actually properly ratified.
So the biggest claim here, the one that everything else hinges on, is that the Fed isn't part of the government at all. It's a private corporation. And its whole purpose, allegedly, wasn't to stabilize the economy for you and me, but to manipulate currency, fund wars, and just print money out of thin air to put entire countries into debt. It's designed, they say, to create inflation. The source does mention a big shift, though, claiming that in 2020, the Fed was finally placed under the control of the U.S. Treasury. And the claims about the IRS, well, they're just as mind-blowing. The source material basically says the IRS is also a private corporation, one that's registered in Puerto Rico. And the kicker? The income taxes it collects supposedly don't even go to fund the U.S. government. The allegation is that the money gets funneled directly to the Vatican. And this quote, which is attributed to former IRS agents, really tries to nail that point home. There is no law nor valid amendment that requires the payment of federal income taxes. I mean, just think about that for a second. The whole takeaway here is that if the very foundation is illegal, then everything that's been built on top of it for the last 100 years is also on shaky ground. Okay, but here's where it gets even crazier. This alleged financial trap isn't just something happening at the big national level. According to the source, it's incredibly personal. It's tied directly to you, to your very identity, right from the moment you were born.
Yeah, this is where the theory really goes off the deep end, in the most fascinating way. The source asks you to consider this. What if your birth certificate wasn't just a happy record of your arrival? What if it was actually a legal document that, behind the scenes, turned you into a piece of corporate property?
The idea they use to explain this is something called the straw man. They describe it as a legal fiction, like a corporate clone of you, that was created when your birth was registered with a state. And the easiest way to spot this straw man in your own life? Just look at your name on things like your driver's license or a bill. If it's written in all capital letters, according to this theory, that's not you. That's your corporate double.
So this really breaks down that split, right? On one side, you've got the living, breathing you, a sovereign person, living under what they call natural law. But on the other side, you have this straw man, this corporate entity. And it's not a person, it's treated as collateral, a debt slave that operates under a totally different set of rules, maritime or commercial law.
Now, the source material points to this quote as the smoking gun. It's attributed to a major presidential advisor back in that 1913 era, and it's pretty shocking. It allegedly lays out the whole plan to register every single person, turning them into cattle and holding a security interest over them forever, essentially turning human beings into the collateral that backs the nation's currency. So, okay, if the old system is this elaborate trap, then what's the way out? This is where the source material introduces a radical solution, a total technological and financial revolution called the quantum financial system, or QFS for short. And this is a really important point they make. The QFS isn't just an upgrade, right? It's not a new banking app or a slightly better version of what we have now. It's described as a completely new parallel system built from scratch to totally replace the old debt-based fiat system we're all used to. And the features they say this QFS has, they sound like something straight out of science fiction. We're talking about a system that's completely unhackable, supposedly running on an off-world quantum computer. Instead of being based on debt, every dollar is backed by real hard assets, like gold. It promises to give you absolute, undeniable ownership of your money, which would make things like fraud, money laundering, or having your funds frozen just impossible. In a system like this, stuff like mortgages and credit card debt would basically become obsolete. This side-by-side really just puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? You go from a debt-based system controlled by central banks to an asset-backed one where you are in control. You replace inflation and manipulation with total stability. And instead of slow, vulnerable transactions that have to go through middlemen like Swift, you get instant, direct, and completely unhackable settlements.
Okay, so what does all this high-tech quantum stuff actually mean for you and me, for our wallets? Well, the final piece of this theory paints a picture of almost unbelievable abundance, all through something called wealth repatriation.
So here's the breakdown of how this is all supposed to work. Remember that straw man entity created from your birth certificate? Well, the source claims it also created a trust in your name. This trust, which is tied to your life, has supposedly been traded on stock markets your entire life, building up a massive amount of value. The QFS, they say, will be able to calculate the exact value of that trust and then return it all to you. And not just that, it's also supposed to include every single dollar of income tax you've ever paid. And the numbers that get thrown around in the source material, they are just staggering. It's estimated that for someone over the age of 50, the value of their personal trust could be over $1 billion. I mean, that's a number that's hard to even wrap your head around, but it's at the very heart of what this financial reset is promising.
The world this paints is, well, it's a utopia, a world where financial stress is just gone. Imagine being able to work at a job you truly love, not just one you need to survive. Imagine all the funding that would suddenly be available for huge humanitarian projects, for healing the planet. It's presented as the absolute end of debt slavery and the real beginning of a new golden age for humanity.
And that brings us to the final thought here. The theory we've just walked through describes the complete teardown of our financial world as we know it, and in its place, a future of incredible, widespread abundance. It's a really powerful and definitely provocative idea. So I'll leave you with this question. If a world without debt is actually possible, what would that really be like? And are we even ready for it? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.